My name is Maya Hart. I am 35 years old, and for most of my life I believed I was a good daughter. Everything I did revolved around earning my mother Marjorie's approval. That is why I spent weeks planning what I thought would be the perfect birthday celebration for her at her favorite restaurant in Boston. As she lifted her crystal glass for a toast, I braced myself for a rare moment of gratitude. Instead, she looked straight at me and declared that the greatest gift I could ever give her would be to walk out of her life. She had no idea how seriously I would take those words. Before I share how I disappeared from her world, leave a comment telling me where you are watching from and subscribe if you have ever had to step away from a toxic family. To understand why her words struck me so deeply, you have to know the history between us. My childhood was filled with sharp glances and cutting remarks. Nothing I achieved ever seemed enough. My drawings were dismissed as sloppy, my grades never high enough, and my clothes never stylish enough. While other mothers proudly pinned their children's artwork on refrigerators, mine would criticize every flaw and toss my efforts in the trash. In public, she yanked my shoulders back so hard it left red marks, insisting I stand straighter. She demanded I smile, but then mocked the way I looked when I tried. Those endless corrections became the constant background of my early years. My father, however, was the opposite. He was warm, encouraging, and quick to praise. He became my shield against my mother's coldness. His eyes lit up when I brought him a science fair project or a story I had written. "That's my bright girl," he would say, and those words gave me the courage I needed. But when I was 12, everything changed. My father died suddenly of a heart attack. I was the one who found him collapsed in the backyard while my mother was away at her weekly bridge club. I can still hear myself screaming for help, the neighbor rushing over to perform CPR, the ambulance lights flashing against our house. At the hospital, her first words were not of comfort. She demanded to know why I had not been watching him more carefully, reminding me that I knew his heart was weak. That accusation planted itself inside me and grew into a guilt she would cultivate for decades. My teenage years turned into a desperate race for approval that never arrived. I joined every club, kept a flawless grade point average of 4.0, became captain of the debate team, and even served as editor of the school newspaper. Still, every accomplishment was compared to someone else's child. Brooke's daughter admitted to Harvard or Paige's daughter praised for her perfect recital performance. Even so, I earned a full scholarship to Northwestern University. When I showed her the acceptance letter, she dismissed it with a sneer, saying I would likely drop out within a semester because college was more difficult than I imagined. But I did not. I graduated summa cum laude with degrees in both finance and economics. She did not attend the ceremony, claiming she had a migraine. Her interference also destroyed my relationships. At 22, I dated Adrian, a kind medical student who all my friends adored. When he joined us for dinner, my mother spent the evening highlighting how awkward I had always been with men and how surprised she was that he noticed me at all. Within a week, she called him privately, warning him about my supposed emotional issues and telling him I needed more therapy before I could be serious with anyone. Soon after, he ended things. The pattern repeated when I dated Colin at 25 and Owen at 28. Each time she found subtle ways to sabotage my happiness, justifying it with the claim that she was only trying to protect me from my poor choices. Despite everything, I built a career for myself. By the time I was 35, I was managing portfolios for high-net-worth clients and had been promoted to senior advisor at my firm. I bought a beautiful condo in Boston's Back Bay and created a stable, independent life. Yet I still supported my mother financially. After my father's death, she never worked, relying first on insurance and then on his pension. When those funds ran out, I covered her expenses, paying property taxes, covering utility bills, and financing her indulgent lifestyle. Every Sunday, I drove to her house in Brooklyn, where she complained endlessly about her neighbors, her friends, and most often about me. For her 65th birthday, I wanted to give her something unforgettable. I rented a private room at Fleming's Steakhouse, her favorite restaurant. I invited her closest friends, hired a professional photographer, and ordered a custom cake from a bakery she had once mentioned in passing. For months, I worked with a jeweler to restore my grandmother's sapphire bracelet, a piece she had always longed for but which had been left to me. I thought gifting it to her might finally bring the approval I had chased for so long. The week before, I told my therapist that this birthday would be different, that maybe, at last, my mother would see how much I cared. My therapist's silence and cautious look warned me otherwise, but hope is stubborn, and I held on. When the evening arrived, the private dining room at Fleming's glowed with candlelight reflecting off crystal and china. White roses and hydrangeas, her favorite flowers, filled the tables. The chef prepared her preferred appetizers, and the bartender stocked extra bottles of her favorite Cabernet. I showed up an hour early, making sure every single detail was flawless. My heart was both eager and uneasy as I straightened the place cards and fine-tuned the lighting. The restaurant manager assured me everything would go off without a hitch. He smiled and said that my mother must be very special. She is, I replied automatically, though a knot tightened in my stomach at the thought of everything beneath the surface. At 7 o'clock on the dot, the guests began to arrive. My mother's friends welcomed me warmly and complimented the evening I had arranged. Ruth, her oldest friend, told me how lucky my mother was to have me. I gave a polite smile while a quiet question lingered inside me. Did my mother actually feel the same way? At 7:15, my mother appeared, wearing the expensive black dress I had bought for her at Christmas, her silver hair perfectly set. I stepped forward to hug her, but she offered her cheek for a kiss instead. Her first words were a complaint about the valet taking too long, followed by a remark that the room was too dark for anyone to see properly. I quickly offered to ask them to brighten the lighting, but she sighed and waved me off, saying it would be fine. She asked who had chosen the flowers and complained that hydrangeas made her sneeze, hydrangeas that, for as long as I could remember, she had planted in our garden every spring. I stayed silent, signaling the waiter to bring her a glass of wine. Dinner unfolded with my mother presiding over the table and barely acknowledging my presence, except to ask me to tell the waiter her steak was overcooked, even though it was cooked exactly medium rare, as she had requested. After the main course and before dessert arrived, I rose to present my gift. The small blue velvet box felt heavy in my hands as I walked to her chair. "Mom," I said, trying to steady my voice, "I wanted to give you something special for your 65th birthday." I handed her the box and explained that it was our grandmother's bracelet, fully restored and fitted with a white gold clasp. The room hushed while she opened it. The sapphires flashed under the lights, twinkling in their white gold settings. I had spent thousands having the piece professionally restored by a leading jeweler in Boston. My mother examined the bracelet for a long moment before snapping the box shut. She spoke flatly that our grandmother should have left the piece to her in the first place and complained that our grandmother had favored me unduly. The table grew awkwardly quiet. Ruth reached over and touched my mother's arm lightly, telling her it was a beautiful gift. My mother set the box on the table without another word. My cheeks burned with shame as I returned to my seat. When the cake arrived, the candles were lit and everyone sang happy birthday. My mother smiled for the photographer and then rose to make a toast, her voice carrying across the now silent room. She spoke about the pleasure of being surrounded by true friends on her birthday and how she increasingly valued authenticity. Finally, she turned her gaze toward me. What she said next plays in my memory in slow motion. She raised her glass and continued with an expression that had gone cold. "If I were to wish for a gift this year," she said, "the best thing would be for certain people to leave her life entirely, no more pretense, no more obligation, only freedom from relationships that were never meant to be." The room fell utterly still. Her friends shifted uneasily, some staring at their plates, others exchanging discreet looks. There was no mistaking the target of her words. She finished her sip of wine as though she had not just publicly rejected her only child. I sat frozen, unable to move or form a single word. The photographer, sensing the tension, quietly packed his gear and left with the cake untouched between us. For the rest of the evening, my mother continued to chat with her friends as if nothing had occurred. I went through the motions of hosting on autopilot while her words looped in my head. The drive home was charged with silence. At her house, she gathered her belongings, including the closed box with the bracelet, and as she opened the car door, she muttered that the dinner had been adequate and that next time I should choose a better restaurant because, in her view, Fleming's had gone downhill. I could not keep myself from asking whether she had meant what she said about wanting me out of her life. She paused with one foot on the curb and told me not to be so sensitive, that she had been making a general statement. It did not feel general to me. I pressed, saying it had felt very specific. She sighed heavily and told me that if I chose to take things personally, that was my problem. She added that our relationship had always been a burden to her, that she had done her duty raising me and was not obliged to pretend there was a special bond between us now. When I reminded her that I paid her bills, maintained her house, and took her to every doctor's appointment, she snapped back, asking whether I thought financial support bought me a place in her life. "That is your father in you," she said, accusing me of keeping score. Then she slammed the car door and walked into the house without looking back. I sat in the driveway for nearly 20 minutes, crying until I could compose myself enough to drive away. Lying in bed that night, I accepted a truth I had been avoiding. Nothing would ever change. No achievement, no gift, no sacrifice would ever be sufficient to make my mother love me. For 35 years I had been running on a relentless wheel, wearing myself out pursuing an impossible goal. As the first light of morning edged in, I made a decision that would alter both our lives forever. I did not sleep. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad and spent the night writing lists and drafting plans until the sun rose at 6 o'clock in the morning. I mapped out a complete strategy to disappear from my mother's life, not only emotionally, but also practically and financially. First, I called my office and left a message for my boss explaining that I needed to take 2 weeks of emergency personal leave. I had built up months of unused vacation time over the years, always too occupied looking after my mother to take a break. Next, I rang Owen Barrett, a realtor I had once helped buy investment properties. When he called back, I told him plainly that I needed to sell my condo quickly and quietly. "No public listings, no open houses," I said. "Find a private buyer who will pay in cash, even if that means accepting slightly less than market value." "Are you in some kind of trouble, Maya?" he asked, his voice threaded with concern. "No trouble at all," I replied, keeping my tone steady. "I am just making some necessary changes." By noon I had an appointment with my financial advisor, Lucas Kramer. I arrived at his office carrying a carefully prepared list of accounts and assets. "I need to untangle my finances from my mother's," I explained. "Every account, every automatic payment, every connection." Lucas scanned the paperwork with a professional calm. "This is extensive," he observed. "You are currently covering her property taxes, utilities, credit card minimums, car insurance, and medical copays." "Yes," I said. "And I want all of it to stop immediately." He hesitated. "May I ask why?" "This is quite sudden," he said, puzzled. "It is time for both of us to live independently," I answered simply. We spent the next 3 hours reorganizing my financial life. I froze the joint checking account I had used to deposit money for her expenses. I canceled the automatic transfers from my accounts to her creditors. I removed myself as an authorized user on her credit cards and removed her as beneficiary on my life insurance policy and my retirement accounts. "What about the mortgage on her house?" Lucas asked. "You have been covering those payments for 5 years. Stop those 2 payments," I said firmly. "The house is in her name. That responsibility is hers." After the meeting, I went to the post office and set up a new P.O. box to forward my mail. I called every shared service provider, from the home security company to the lawn care company, and removed my name and payment details. Using the habits and precision I had from my career in finance, I was meticulous. No loose ends, no overlooked automatic debits, no financial threads that could drag me back. At my condo, I packed only the essentials: clothing, important documents, irreplaceable photographs, and a few sentimental items that had belonged to my father. Everything else could be sold with the condo or donated. As I folded clothes and boxed up framed photos, I realized how little of my life was actually mine. So much had been purchased or arranged to satisfy my mother's expectations. The expensive artworks I never loved, the formal dining set I never used, the uncomfortable designer clothes, all could stay behind. That evening, I wrote her a letter. It took 7 drafts before I found a way to say what I needed without sounding angry or accusatory. "Mom," I wrote, "you said the best gift would be for me to leave your life. I am giving you that gift. By the time you read this, I will be gone. The financial support I have provided over the years has ended. The house bills and all expenses are now solely your responsibility. This is not done out of anger, but out of acceptance. You are right that our relationship has been based on obligation rather than love. I release us both from that obligation. Do not try to find me. I do not wish to be found." I sealed the envelope and drove to her house late that night. I slid the letter under her door and walked away without once looking back. I checked into a hotel using a different name and paid in cash. Sitting on the bland hotel bed, I felt a strange jumble of grief and relief. For the first time in my life, I was not responsible for her comfort, her happiness, or her finances. The weight that had pressed down on me for decades felt enormous and suddenly lighter, and I actually gasped aloud in the quiet room. Over the next week, my plan moved forward with methodical precision. Owen found a cash buyer for the condo who agreed to pay 15% below market value so the sale could close quickly and privately. I opened new bank accounts at another institution and transferred my assets. I shut down my social media, got a new phone number, and drove west with only what fit in my car, without a fixed destination. Each mile separated me from the life I had known. I stopped checking my old email and ignored calls from numbers I did not recognize. I severed every tether to my former existence. The first week of freedom was disorienting. Habit made me reach for my phone to check if my mother had taken her medication or to remind her about an appointment. I found myself still planning Sunday visits that would no longer happen. Waves of guilt would crash over me, leaving me breathless and uncertain. Yet under the guilt ran a current of unexpected possibility. For the first time, my choices affected only me. My time was mine, and the resources I had built over years of work were now mine to direct. I had disappeared from my mother's life completely. Exactly 1 week after I vanished, my mother began attempting to reach me. At first, the messages she left on my old email and voicemails to my disconnected number carried irritation rather than concern. "Maya, the lawn service says you canceled their contract. Call me immediately. The electric company claims the automatic payment was stopped. Fix this today. My prescriptions need refilling. Where are you?" Not once did she mention my letter. In her mind, I still owed her the role of caretaker, regardless of what had been said or written. 10 days after I left, my former assistant Megan reached out to the new email address I had shared only with her and my therapist. "Your mother came to the office today," she wrote. "She was furious and demanded to know where you were. Security had to escort her out when she began shouting. Is everything all right?" I thanked Megan for letting me know but offered no further details. That same day, Ruth contacted my therapist's office in an attempt to learn something about me. Bound by confidentiality, my therapist revealed nothing but passed along the message. During our next phone session, Dr. Alvarez said carefully, "Your mother seems to be escalating. Ruth told me she has been calling everyone you know and is becoming increasingly frantic." 2 weeks into my disappearance, my mother realized her mortgage payment had gone unpaid. Ruth later explained to my therapist that this discovery sent her spiraling. For 5 years, she had not made a single payment and had apparently forgotten the process entirely. Her next battleground became social media. Even though I had shut down my accounts, friends forwarded me screenshots of her posts, which grew more dramatic each day. "My daughter has abandoned me without warning. After all that I sacrificed for her, she has left her elderly mother without care or support. Please help me find her." The comments quickly filled with sympathy from those who only knew her version of events. A few voices expressed doubt, but they were drowned out by her supporters. By the 3rd week, she received official notice that our joint account had been frozen. Ruth, who continued updating my therapist, reported that this was the moment reality truly began to sink in. My mother went to the bank in a fury, demanding answers. When staff explained the account was no longer accessible and suggested she open a new one with her own funds, she admitted she had none. For years, she had never bothered to understand her own finances. Though she received a modest pension from my father's work and monthly Social Security, she had long relied on my contributions to maintain her lifestyle. Without them, she confronted a harsh truth. A month after I left, she received overdue notices on her credit cards. All 6 of them had been maxed out, and she had been making minimum payments using the money I provided. Now she faced more than $40,000 in debt with no way to pay. When Owen Barrett placed a sold sign in front of my condo, my mother rushed there in panic, only to find the new owners moving in. They had no information to give her. 5 weeks after my departure, she missed a second mortgage payment and received her first formal warning from the bank. Combined with her crushing credit card debt, the stress triggered a health crisis. Ruth discovered her collapsed in the kitchen, hyperventilating during an anxiety attack. At the hospital, her blood pressure was dangerously high, and the doctor prescribed medication for both hypertension and anxiety. She kept asking for you, Ruth told my therapist. It was the first time I saw her actually worried about you, rather than only what you could provide. After 6 weeks, my mother left her first voicemail that was not filled with demands or accusations. Her voice sounded smaller, friendlier. Maya, I do not understand why you have done this. I need you to come home. I miss you. The final words seemed forced and unnatural, as if expressing affection was a language she had never learned to speak. 2 months after I vanished, foreclosure notices arrived. The house, valued at nearly $1 million in Brooklyn's expensive market, held significant equity, but she had no idea how to access it or handle a sale. Ruth, despite being 80 herself, helped her meet with a financial advisor who laid the facts bare: sell the house, pay off the debt, and find an affordable living situation, or face bankruptcy and foreclosure. Your mother finally broke down, Ruth later reported. She admitted she had driven you away. She even showed me the letter you left. It was the first time I have seen her accept responsibility for anything in the 40 years I have known her. 3 months into my absence, my mother wrote me a letter. Ruth forwarded it to my therapist, who gently asked if I wished to read it. I hesitated, but eventually agreed. The letter was unlike anything I had ever received from her. The once elegant penmanship was shaky, and the pages were wrinkled as though they had been crushed in frustration and then smoothed out again. Maya, I have spent these months furious at you for abandoning me. Yesterday, I opened an old photo album in the attic and found pictures of you as a child, memories I had forgotten. Looking at my face in those photos, she wrote, she finally saw what she had refused to acknowledge before, how much I had been hurting, even as a child, because of her. She admitted she had not been a good mother. She confessed to jealousy over my closeness with my father and, after his death, to blaming me because blaming herself was unbearable. She resented my youth and the opportunities she never had. She emphasized that none of this was an excuse. She was not asking for money or assistance. The house, she said, would be sold next month. She planned to move into a senior apartment she could afford on her pension and Social Security. She understood why I left and believed she would have done the same. She ended with a quiet apology signed, Mom. There were no demands, no guilt, no manipulation. For the first time in my life, my mother recognized me as a separate person with real feelings. A week later, Ruth sent another update. My mother had joined a support group for parents estranged from their adult children, was attending therapy weekly, and was learning to handle tasks she had always delegated to others. On her next birthday, exactly 1 year after the dinner that changed everything, Ruth wrote one more message. Marjorie celebrated quietly at home with a small cake she bought herself. She told Ruth it was the first birthday when she truly understood what she had lost, not the financial subsidies or the practical help, but me, simply me. While my mother faced her new reality, I was building my own. After 2 weeks of driving across the country, I landed in Seattle, as far from Boston as I could go while staying within the continental United States. The constant rain and gray skies matched my mood at first, but the grandeur of the Pacific Northwest slowly began to mend something inside me. I found a modest apartment in Queen and with a view of Puget Sound. Unlike my Boston condo, I furnished it entirely to my taste, simple, comfortable pieces in blues and greens that reminded me of the ocean. No formal dining room to impress guests who never came, no showy guest suite, only spaces that felt like home. Leaning on my credentials, I joined a boutique financial firm focused on ethical investing. The company was smaller than my Boston firm, and the clients were less wealthy, but the culture prized work, life balance, and genuine service over prestige and profit. We value advisors who care about their clients as people, not just portfolios, the managing partner told me during my interview. I nearly cried at the plain kindness of that statement. Finding a new therapist was my next priority. Dr. Chen specialized in childhood trauma and toxic family systems. Unlike my Boston therapist, who had gently encouraged reconciliation for years, Dr. Chen affirmed my choice to step away. Estrangement is sometimes the healthiest option, she told me in our first session. Not every relationship can or should be repaired. Those words gave me permission to release the guilt and stop second-guessing the decision that had finally let me breathe. Making friends proved harder than securing work or housing. In Boston, most of my connections were through my mother or my office. In Seattle, I had to build friendships from shared interests alone. I joined a hiking group, a book club, and a community garden. Slowly, I gathered a circle of people who knew nothing of my past and liked me for who I was, not for what I could provide. These new bonds, free of obligation and history, showed me what healthy connection feels like. The first holiday season alone was rough. On Thanksgiving, a wave of grief kept me in bed, crying over old photographs of my father and mourning the family I never truly had. At Christmas, I woke from anxious dreams in which I was frantically shopping for my mother, only to realize I could not remember her preferences anymore. New Year's Eve, though, marked a turning point. My new friend Talia invited me to a small gathering at her home, where I met Erin, a high school English teacher with kind eyes and a quiet humor. We spoke for hours about books, favorite trails, and beloved spots around Seattle. When he asked for my number, I hesitated, old fears tugging at me, but I gave it to him anyway. That small act of openness felt enormous. Our early dates were nothing like the relationships I had in Boston. There was no pressure to dazzle, no calculation about what my mother would think. We simply chose each other's company. Meeting Erin's family became an education in functional love. They disagreed without contempt, showed affection without strings, and took interest in his life without trying to control it. The first time his mother hugged me goodbye, I froze before awkwardly returning the embrace. "Your family is so normal," I told Erin afterward, astonished. He laughed and said they had their quirks, but yes, they were pretty great. 6 months into my new life, therapy brought a breakthrough. Dr. Chen asked me to write a letter to my younger self, the child who tried so hard to earn her mother's love. "Dear little Maya," I wrote, "it was never your job to make Mom happy. Her unhappiness existed long before you, and you neither caused it nor could you cure it. You were a good daughter. You were worthy of love exactly as you were." Reading those words aloud in Dr. Chen's office, I cried until my throat ached. For the first time, I believed them. That same week, my therapist forwarded my mother's letter. As I read, a tangle of feelings rose up, validation that my memories were real, sorrow for the bond we never shared, and a tentative hope that change might be possible. I did not respond right away. Instead, I brought the letter to therapy and spent several sessions exploring what it meant and whether, or how, I wanted to reply. "There is no rush," Dr. Chen reassured me. "Take the time you need to choose what serves you." The 7-month point of my new life ushered in another milestone. At work, I earned a promotion after bringing in several new clients with my approach to financial advising. Instead of chasing maximum returns at all costs, I focused on listening to clients' values and long-term goals, building trust as well as wealth. "You have a gift for making people feel heard," my boss told me. It was, perhaps, the first professional compliment I had ever received that was not tied to numbers or performance metrics. Dating Aaron continued to reshape my understanding of healthy love. When disagreements came, there were no icy silences, no threats of abandonment, no mental tallies of who was wrong. We talked through issues, sometimes haltingly, until we understood each other. When he first told me he loved me, I panicked and withdrew for almost a week. He respected my space yet made it clear he was still there. When I finally confessed my fears, he listened patiently, without judgment. Love should not feel frightening, he said gently. It should feel like coming home. As the first anniversary of my departure from Boston drew near, Ruth sent another update through my therapist. My mother had sold the house, settled her debts, and moved into a senior apartment. She had begun taking art classes and joined a book club. The photo Ruth attached showed her older, softened somehow, holding up a watercolor she had painted and smiling hesitantly at the camera. Looking at that picture, I made a decision I never imagined I would. I would return to Boston, not to rescue her, not to stay, but to see with my own eyes who she had become in my absence. After a year of building a new life in Seattle, I boarded a plane for Boston carrying both dread and curiosity. Aaron offered to come, but I knew this was a journey I had to make alone. I did not tell my mother. I was not ready for a planned reunion with its weight of expectation. Instead, I booked a downtown hotel and spent my first day reacquainting myself with the city that had once defined me. Boston felt at once familiar and alien, like a dream recalled after waking. I strolled through the public garden, past my old office, and walked by my former condo. These places, once the framework of my life, now seemed to belong to someone else entirely. The following day, I visited Ruth, the only person besides my therapist who knew I was in town. At 81, she was still sharp and thoughtful. "Your mother has changed," she told me over tea in her Beacon Hill apartment. "Not completely, she still has her moments, but there is a humility in her now I never thought I would see." "Do you think I should see her?" I asked. Ruth paused, then said, "Only you can decide that, dear. But I will say this, the woman who told you to leave her life is not entirely the same woman who now lives in that senior apartment." I had not intended to visit my mother that day, but leaving Ruth's building, I found myself driving toward Brooklyn almost automatically. Her new address was a modest senior complex, nothing like the grand colonial home she had clung to for decades. I parked across the street, planning only to look at the building before leaving. But as I sat in the rental car, I saw her approaching the entrance with a small grocery bag. Her movements were slower, her posture less rigid than I remembered. Without fully deciding, I got out. We nearly collided at the coffee shop beside her building. I had stepped inside for a coffee to steady my nerves, and there she was in line. She did not notice me at first. My hair was shorter now, my style more casual, my face more relaxed. But when the barista called out, "Maya," she turned, her eyes widening in shock. "Maya," she whispered. "Hello, Mom," I said softly. We stood frozen as the bustle of the shop moved around us. At last, she spoke again. Are you all right?" The question startled me. In all our years together, she had rarely asked with such sincerity. "I am," I answered. "Are you?" She nodded, her eyes never leaving mine. Would you sit with me?" "Just for a few minutes," she asked. I hesitated, then motioned toward a small table by the window. We sat there awkwardly, two strangers with a complicated bond. "I did not know you were in Boston," she said eventually. "I told no one except Ruth," I replied. She nodded again, seeming to understand. "You look well, different, but well." "So do you," I said, and I meant it. The sharp edges of her disapproval had softened. After a few moments of small talk about the weather and the coffee, I suggested we walk to the park across the street. It was neutral ground, more private than the crowded cafe. On a bench, we sat with space between us. Silence stretched until my mother did something I had never witnessed before. She cried. Not the manipulative tears of the past, but quiet, genuine tears she tried to brush away. "I am sorry," she said, her voice steady despite the trembling. "I never thought I would see you again." "I never planned to come back," I admitted. I understand why, she said, nodding. I have had much time to reflect. Ruth mentioned I joined a support group. Yes, parents estranged from adult children. PAC, I believe they call it. She gave a small, almost embarrassed laugh. At first, I went to learn how to get you back. But what I learned instead was why you left. She shifted slightly, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The other parents in the group told endless stories about ungrateful children who abandoned them for no reason. Yet as I listened, I began to notice the patterns, the control, the criticism, the emotional manipulation. And I saw myself in their stories. It was deeply uncomfortable. I sat silent, hardly able to believe what I was hearing. My therapist, Dr. Patel, helped me face something I had spent my entire life avoiding. She drew in a shaky breath. I treated you the way my own mother treated me. The admission stunned me. My grandmother, who had died when I was 10, had always been spoken of as a saint in family lore. Your grandmother, my mother nodded slowly. She was cruel. Nothing I did ever pleased her. She constantly compared me to cousins and neighbors' children, and she told me more than once that I was the greatest disappointment of her life. Her voice broke. Does that sound familiar? A chill ran through me despite the warm spring air. You never told me, I whispered. I never told anyone, she said softly. I felt ashamed, as though her cruelty had been my fault. When you were born, I swore I would be different. But I had no model for healthy mothering, only glossy images from magazines and television that I could never live up to. That explains some things, I said carefully. But it does not excuse them. No, she agreed instantly. It does not. Nothing excuses the way I treated you, especially after your father died. I was jealous of your closeness with him. He knew how to love you in a way I did not know how to love anyone. I blinked in surprise. My mother had never once acknowledged my father's gentle parenting, much less admitted envy of the bond we shared. After he died, I blamed you because I could not bear to blame myself for not being there when he needed me. And then, over the years, it became a habit, making you responsible for my comfort, my happiness, my everything. She wiped another tear from her cheek. It was wrong, Maya. All of it was wrong. We sat quietly, decades of pain pressing down between us. At last, she reached into her purse. I brought something for you. She pulled out a worn leather journal. I have been writing in this since you left. My therapist suggested I use it to understand my behavior and its effect on you. You do not have to read it. But if you ever want to know my truth, my childhood, my marriage to your father, my failures as a mother, and my attempts to change, it is all there. I took the journal, its weight heavy in my hands. Thank you, I murmured, uncertain whether I would ever open it. I am not asking for forgiveness, she continued. And I am not asking to re-enter your life. I only wanted you to know that I understand now why you left, and that I am sorry I gave you no choice but to do so. As we parted, there was no dramatic embrace, no sweeping promise of reconciliation. Instead, there was something far more valuable, truth. For the first time, we had spoken honestly about the wreckage of our past. I live in Seattle now, I told her as we stood to leave. I have built a good life there. She smiled, a genuine smile, free of bitterness. I am glad. That is what I should have wanted for you from the beginning. I cannot make promises, I said cautiously, but if you want, we could exchange emails. Just see how it goes. I would like that very much, she said, her voice steady though her eyes brimmed with unfallen tears. We agreed to keep our contact limited, emails only for 3 months, no phone calls, no visits. Just words thought out, written down, read carefully. As I watched her walk back toward the senior apartment building, her posture straighter, but without that rigid severity, I felt something unexpected, hope. Not the childish hope for the mother I had always craved, but a tentative hope for an honest connection between two flawed adults bound by history yet willing to try again. On the flight back to Seattle, I held the journal in my lap, but left it closed. Some truths needed to be opened slowly, with time and guidance. I planned to share it first with Dr. Chin, and only then decide whether I was ready to read my mother's unfiltered words. Aaron met me at the airport, his steady presence easing the storm inside me. How did it go? He asked gently as we drove home. Honestly, I answered, it was nothing like I expected. And maybe, just maybe, better than I feared. 2 full years have passed since I stepped out of my mother's life. In that time, I have built something I never believed possible, a life shaped by peace rather than anxiety, by authentic connection rather than obligation, by self-worth instead of endless attempts at winning approval. My career in Seattle has flourished. Last year, I was made partner at the firm, where I focus on helping women achieve financial independence after divorce or widowhood. The work feels meaningful in a way my position in Boston never did, perhaps because I know from experience how financial freedom can create emotional freedom too. Aaron proposed 6 months ago on a mountain trail overlooking the Olympic Range. Unlike my earlier relationships, this love grew slowly, built on mutual respect and genuine affection. When I said yes, it was with absolute certainty, not the nagging doubt that once shadowed my choices. My relationship with my mother has also evolved in ways I never anticipated. Our emails grew into occasional phone calls. Last Christmas, I invited her to Seattle. To my surprise, she came. Watching her with Aaron and his family was astonishing. She was quieter, more thoughtful, less critical than I had ever seen her. When Aaron's young niece proudly held up a drawing for my mother, she admired it with genuine warmth, offering encouragement instead of pointing out flaws or making comparisons. It was as though she was learning how to be a grandmother by watching Aaron's parents interact with their grandchildren. Later, after she returned to Boston, Aaron said quietly, "Your mother is not at all what I expected based on your stories." "She is not the same person," I replied, realizing the truth even as I spoke. "And neither am I." Aaron and I began planning a small wedding for the following spring. When I cautiously asked my mother if she would like to attend, her reply surprised me. "I would be honored," she wrote. "But I will understand if you change your mind. This day should be perfect for you, not stressful because of my presence." That simple consideration of my feelings, her willingness to step back if needed, showed me how far she had come. 2 years earlier, she would have demanded center stage or declined entirely out of spite. She continued therapy and her support group. She started volunteering in a community garden and even began teaching art classes at her senior living facility. I knew we would never share the kind of close mother-daughter bond that some of my friends had with their mothers. Too much harm had been done in my childhood, and certain scars, though healed, never disappear completely. But what we had was something different, something earned through painful distance, hard reflection, and intentional change. What we shared now was an honest relationship between two adults who saw each other clearly, flaws and strengths alike. 6 months after my visit to Boston, I finally opened the journal she had given me, reading it with Dr. Chen's support. Inside were pages filled with pain I had never imagined, insights I had never expected, and a perspective on our shared history that helped me understand, though not excuse, the dynamics that had shaped our lives. Looking back, I know disappearing was necessary not just for me, but for her too. As long as I remained in the role of the dutiful daughter, absorbing her criticism and meeting her needs, neither of us could truly change. It was only in my absence that she was forced to confront her behavior and its consequences. Not everyone will understand my choice. Some will think it was cruel to leave an aging parent without support. Others will question why I ever allowed contact again. But I have learned that healing is rarely linear or simple. Sometimes the kindest act we can take, for ourselves and for others, is to step away until we are seen for who we truly are. Sometimes those who wounded us most deeply can change, given time and the right motivation. And sometimes the family we choose can teach us how to mend the injuries left by the family we were born into. Aaron and I are building a life grounded in respect, openness, and genuine love. His family welcomed me with a warmth I had never experienced, and my circle of friends continues to expand, each bond teaching me more about healthy connection. My relationship with my mother moves forward cautiously, each interaction a careful test of our new boundaries and understanding. Old patterns still try to resurface, but now we have the tools to recognize them and redirect before they cause harm. At her most recent birthday dinner, a modest gathering at a nearby restaurant, she lifted her glass for a toast. This time, Her words were very different from the ones that shattered me 2 years earlier. To second chances, she said simply, and to the daughter who was brave enough to leave, so that both of us could become better versions of ourselves. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself and others is the courage to step away until they learn to see your true worth. Have you ever had to create distance from someone you love in order to heal? Share your experience in the comments if this story resonates with you. Please like, subscribe, and pass it along to someone who might need these words. And remember, boundaries are not selfish. They are the foundation of peace, and it is never too late to build them.